Prepare yourself for the clash of punk rock, politics, and your uncensored, unafraid host, Remso W. Martinez. You are about to experience the Remso Republic.
Hey folks, welcome once again to the Remso Republic. I'm your host, Remso W. Martinez. Now, this week, I've been listening to a lot of, the criticisms you guys have had about the show, and I've got to say, thank you so much for letting me know about what you like. I know some of you want a new game segment back, because I know that you realize that Logan Albright, our guest from a few weeks ago, murdered Lightning Round, so I'm still trying to find out something that we could do so that we have something fun and kind of random at the end of the segment for the, bottom half of the show. But so far, we've had great reception. We're gaining more and more traction every day. But one thing you guys keep asking me is, what is a conservatarian? Because, in the great family tree of libertarianism, you've got your volunteerists, your anarchists, your classical liberals, your minarchists. If you meet a libertarian, they probably have some crazy random self-identifier that they probably just made up. But this is something that is catching on. I don't just call myself it because it was a funny-sounding word that I put together. It's actually something that we've seen come up since, I want to say 2008 with Ron Paul. And with Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, we've seen a more conservatarian bent in the way our politics is, despite all the crazy progressive nationalism we've seen this election cycle. So I have a guest on today that's going to talk a little bit about that with me, along with some other things such as the cultural war that we have in our society. But let me go ahead and introduce him. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a professional political analyst, a writer, and the editor-in-chief of the Libertarian Republic. He recently worked on Steve Forbes' latest book, Reviving America, which I still need to get a copy of. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Keith Farrell to the show. Keith, how's it going?
Hey, Remso. Great. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. I've wanted to get you on for a while, so it's glad that we finally have you here calling in to kind of hash things out, let the audience hear you a little bit. So, Keith, I'm glad that I got the opportunity to talk to you about this, because when people ask me, who are some prominent conservatarians like yourself, I'm not saying I'm prominent, but, there aren't a lot of people that take on that label, because if libertarianism wasn't fringe enough, I think for a lot of people to come out and identify as a conservatarian is something that's still not necessarily mainstream, even in our neck of the woods. So you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a subset of a subset at this point. So it is ridiculous when you look at it that way. But I think a lot of us who are attracted to libertarianism and constitutional conservative ideas find that we don't really have a lot of bedfellows on a lot of issues when it comes to the broader libertarian movement, or likewise the conservative movement. So we find ourselves kind of stuck in this unique place where, for myself, it's kind of, I have a little bit more of a hawkish outlook on some foreign policy issues. I have more realistic views when it comes to national policy and stuff, rather than some libertarians who are strident in their opposition of all things government, to the point where they just, anything short of wanting to abolish all federal programs immediately is derided as some sort of neoconservative fascist position. So I think for me, that I was trying to find this place in between, this anarchy bent libertarianism and a conservatism which was becoming way too socially concerned with governing people in their personal relations. So for me, it's kind of like a halfway point in between libertarianism and conservatism. And I think, like you said in the beginning, we have a Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and these kind of guys who kind of embody this constitutional conservatism with a libertarian flair. And conservatarianism is a good way to kind of describe that. And Charles Cook from
National Review.
National Review, yeah, he wrote a book, I believe, about conservatarianism. I believe he's the one that actually first I coined the term, and I have yet to read the book. It seems like something that is definitely appealing to me, and something I've explored myself a little bit in my own writing. So,
yeah, not to give you a spoiler for the book, but there's this one article that was written about it. I think it was from Rare.com. But I've actually read the book a couple times because it helped me understand kind of where I fit in things. And with Charles Cook, his idea was basically there is this group of people who are like us. I think the way he put it was we feel libertarian around conservatives, but conservative around libertarians.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, it really makes us the black sheep of the black sheep. It's like if the black sheep had a redhead stepchild, that would be us.
Right.
And I've written some articles about this over at thelibertyconservative.com talking about what it means to be a conservatarian, and to really just kind of condense it down because I don't want to bog people down of the comparisons and the similarities between conservatives and libertarians. I think the biggest thing was this. I'm a libertarian that understands federalism and the fact that I don't live in a void and I live in a country where there are people who aren't libertarians. Because I think, and I've seen this being a member of the Libertarian Party, having worked on libertarian campaigns, it's like we really push just to get that 1 or 2 libertarian vote for the election, but we ignore everybody else. And while I'm not necessarily fond of caucusing with Democrats on a lot of things, I think there's a strong number of conservatives that are also kind of like us. It's like in a previous episode I did when I was describing conservatarianism again, I kind of took a twist on what Gary Johnson does to describe libertarianism. I basically said I'm socially conservative, but I'm not willing to let the government go and dictate people's lives to a large degree. And then when it comes to economics, I'm a complete Austrian. But when it comes to foreign policy, I'm a realist because I understand if you're walking around passing out daisies to people, Putin's going to come down with a stick and beat the living shit out of you.
Anybody moves, anybody says anything, cut the boy's other eye out and feed it to his father, and then we'll start. You can breathe. You can blink. You can cry. Hell, you're all going to be doing that. Taking it like a champ.
Exactly. And that puts it well. And I think a lot of the problem with the libertarian movement as it kind of grows from being this kind of fringe philosophy and ideology to gaining more mainstream traction is that a lot of the people who are identifying as libertarians right now have an attraction to the idea of being fringe, to being on the outside of the mainstream so that, they can maybe feels better for them psychologically, or maybe for whatever reason they feel more naturally inclined to being in a position where they could critique the mainstream rather than being a part of it. But that's counterproductive to political progress. And all you have to do is look at the way that libertarians regard somebody like Ted Cruz or even Mitt Romney with such vitriol. I mean,
oh my God, just of Ted Cruz alone, if you were a libertarian that came out in support of Cruz, it was almost like the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, it was terrible, and the arguments they have against him are almost all based in hyperbole, or they are things about procedural Senate tactics, which get really into like complex, muddled waters. And Rand Paul and Ted Cruz decided to have a different approach to a bill, so they must one of them must be good and one must be evil. But
if you go against the the House Paul, you have to be a heretic.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was something someone literally told me one time. They told me, they sent me a message to my fan page, and they're like, Remso, this is back when Cruz was still in the race. He was like, Remso, you're a heretic and a traitor to the Republic for citing of Ted Cruz into Rand Paul on this issue, and it was just like, go away.
Oh, absolutely. And I got a lot of angry messages and emails as well when I came out and supported Ted Cruz, because I decided to support Ted Cruz before Rand Paul officially got out of the race, because I guess I realized Rand Paul's campaign was dead before Rand Paul did. But you know, Ted Cruz was a great candidate, and he's a stronger campaigner than Rand Paul is by far. And I would have no problem backing Ted Cruz again. I mean, again, the guy is solid on the Constitution, solid Second Amendment. He's got a history of standing up against special interests. He stood up against the ethanol lobby in Iowa. He says that the First Amendment applies to atheists like me as much as it applies to Christians like you, Remzo. So, I mean, here's a guy that we can both say will defend our First Amendment religious liberties equally. I don't see any problem with him. I don't agree with every position he has, but I don't agree with every position that any politician has. And if you find yourself in that place where you're agreeing with everything a commentator or a politician has to say, I think you probably need to take a step back, because you're probably not being honestly objective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought up the fringe libertarians that like to kind of remain in their clique, because that's what I want to talk about right after this commercial break. Folks, you're listening to the Remso Republic. Hang on tight. We'll be back in a minute.
Take the show on the go by subscribing to the Remso Republic on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, and YouTube. Don't be left out.
Here's the Republican and Democrat parties have used social issues and crises to keep us at odds with one another. They've divided us into groups and pit each group against the other, while those in government have together collaborated to strip us of our liberty little by little. In 2009, I decided to do something about it, and the Rupert for Senate campaign was born. Government of, by, and for the people requires our participation, not as voters, but as leaders and decision makers. But the parties have made it all but impossible for real, ordinary Americans to do so. So this average American has, since 2009, worked to give the voters, at least of Ohio, a choice outside the parties. The message is simple. The Constitution protects every American equally, but it's powerless to protect itself. That's our job, and it's time we take it seriously. I'm Scott Rupert, independent candidate for Ohio's U.S. Senate, and I approve of this message.
So people often ask me what podcasts I listen to. You know, when I'm not listening to old episodes of my own, that is. There are many great out there. There are some that are entertaining, funny, you learn from them. They just give you a great insight you're not going to hear anywhere else. But there's one show that really comes to mind when I think of where to get your starting ground and understanding what open minds and open markets mean. It's actually the show that I listened to when I first started learning about libertarianism. It's the Lions of Liberty podcast with its host, Mark Claire. Mark and his team do excellent things, from libertarians in a living room drinking liquor to Felony Fridays. They have a great list of just amazing interviews talking to the movers and shakers in the liberty movement. And let me tell you, if you want to get your friends who are a little apolitical, or they're a little liberal or a little conservative, but they like the ideas of liberty, Mark Claire will give it to you at the Lions of Liberty. So go ahead, check them out on Google Play, Stitcher, and iTunes today, and check it out for yourself. I guarantee you will not regret it.
Check it out today at www.lionsofliberty.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Keith, you're in a very awesome position. I'm actually envious sometimes because you really tap into the bloodline of this liberty community, being the editor-in-chief of the Libertarian Republic. You know, you're in the same league as Reason Magazine, and you surpass so many other of these websites and magazines that come out because what TLR does is you guys really show every wing of the liberty movement. And because of that, sometimes, from what I see, as many, TLR fans you get, The TLR haters are so extremely vocal, it's sometimes kind of hilarious.
Oh, yeah, it's really great. I mean, I'm actually considering compiling a list of the angry messages and angry tweets and things we get posted on our Facebook wall.
I'm going to jump in real fast. I was going to announce this later, but I actually am starting a weekly mini-sode called Remso Reads Angry Tweets. So just a quick plug for that, but go ahead, please continue.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of haters, a lot of passionate haters. We got a lot of great fans too, and that's what keeps us going. And we're there to serve the people who appreciate us and to get information out to new people. But as with anything, you're going to get a lot of haters. And as you said, we have a wide variety of writers who identify as all varieties and stripes of libertarian, anarchist, and conservative, and we allow them to opine freely. So, as you said, we try to showcase all perspectives, and that creates interesting discourse, but it also creates a lot of anger because people feel that their view of libertarianism is the view, and if we publish something that is contrary to that, we are now heretics to the cause, if you will.
Do you think you've helped kind of shape the way that libertarians communicate and market themselves in a way?
Well, I think so. And the blueprint that Austin Peterson started here is actually quite innovative and unique, and I've been really thrilled to be a part of growing it. And I think that what we're doing has a lot of potential to continue to grow. And we're launching a new subsection tomorrow, TLR Pop Culture, and we're going to keep trying to reach new audiences and do new stuff, and hopefully continue to grow, compete with even bigger magazines as we do.
Yeah, that's great. Now, when I was younger, when I was just getting into politics, one of the sites I used to go to for a lot of my news and kind of insights into more of right-wing politics was Breitbart. This is back when Andrew Breitbart was alive.
Yes.
And one of the things that he led was the culture war. Because, as socially tolerant as I am, I'm still a social conservative in a lot of ways. I'm a traditionalist. And it's not that I want to use the government to force my ideas and my practices onto other people, but there's a moral relativism streak. And as socially liberal as a lot of the TLR writers are sometimes, I see that you guys have jumped into the culture war on more than one occasion, whether it's attacking, radical Islam to radical feminism. With this new project you guys are jumping into, you're really taking the culture war onto the front lines. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, it really, speaking to what you were first talking about and how we've decided to delve into it, it was my kind of my prerogative when I took over the reins at TLR to extend the range of views and discussions to territory that would be a little bit more friendly for some conservatives as well, which I know some of the more left libertarian writers at TLR are probably listening to this and their heads are exploding because they thought we were already friendly for conservatives, but really
Heresy!
We weren't. Really we weren't. So, it's been my job to kind of, because we want to be a wide-reaching, influential publication. You can't do that if you're only read by people who are self-identifying as purist libertarians. So, yeah, we offer different perspectives and stuff. And the culture war and stuff surrounding culture is something that I found there's a lot of interest around. Even though libertarians will scoff at the idea that there even is a culture war sometimes, they still want to read about it. And
I mean, it's like watching a train wreck. No one wants it to happen, but if it's happening, I'm going to watch the whole thing with popcorn in hand.
Oh my God! They've killed Kenny! You bastards!
Right. And what really got me interested in the culture war is one of my other hobbies besides politics is I like to write fiction, and I considering what creating characters in the modern world and the impact they could have on society, and how some of these characters, like, you know, Captain America and James Bond, and even modern characters like, you know, Walter White from Breaking Bad. These things are larger than life. They're bigger than any sort of you know, news organization or impact of a politician can have, because they influence people on numerous levels, and continue to for some time. You know, if you look at characters like, you know, James Bond or Captain America, their influence and prevalence, it's quite astounding. So when you're thinking about culture and what drives and affects it, you know, we can curse against the dawn all we want, or curse against the dusk rather, but the truth is that, you know, sitting there and writing about politics and news is only going to reach so many people. So my idea was, if we really want to engage in the culture war, we have to start offering content that people who aren't political are also going to be interested in looking at. So the idea is that if we have a pop culture subsection where we're offering discussion about, you know, the latest Game of Thrones episode, where we're putting up movie trailers for the latest upcoming big blockbusters, you know, people who are not going to come to TLR and necessarily read about politics outright, they might come to our site through this other subsection, and, you know, when they're there, they may just look in their little sidebar there and decide that they want to read a piece about gun control, or, you know, why you know, free speech is a valuable thing to uphold on college campuses, or something like that. Maybe they don't. Even if they don't, what they're doing is enabling us to have a larger reach with our Liberty content, because they're going to be, you know, driving traffic and, you know, helping to pay our bills. So that gives us the opportunity to grow and to offer better premium content to our regular readers. So it's kind of like a twofold strategy here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. A method that I've always been a fan of is kind of Salinsky, like, it's don't let people know your intentions outright, but I kind of put them into the things that you do and the things that you say, and maybe they'll, you know, spark an interest in it and want to pursue what you're into a little bit more. Because I think, you know, as libertarians, I think that we're handicapped because we have such a negative kind of reputation amongst many mainstream Americans. I think over the past 6-7 years or so, because, I mean, growing up as a teenager, when I heard libertarians, I thought anarchists. When I first started hearing about Ron Paul, I'm like, wow, this guy's kind of crazy. It wasn't until I got a little older where I'm basically like, you know, maybe these libertarians are onto something, and maybe this Ron Paul guy is actually onto something. And it's because everything else in the world was just getting so much darker that it made me think about different things. I know there are other people like me, but, you know, culture is important. And that's actually what I want to talk about right after this commercial break. Folks, you're listening to the Remso Republic. Hang on tight. We'll be back in a minute.
Remso in the mix.
What's our problem with messaging the ideas of liberty? Is it the ideas? Is it the people? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's the fact that we're just not doing it in a smart type of way. This is where the Libertarian Youth Caucus comes in. The Libertarian Youth Caucus represents the millennial wing of the Libertarian Party. They're trying to expand the party base while finding new ways to communicate simple, timeless principles such as open minds and free markets. What we need to know is how to find the next generation of voters and make them vote for liberty. We can have a smaller government and a freer economy in our lifetime. And I believe that if we want to help invest in the Libertarian Party, the best way to do so is with the Libertarian Youth Caucus. Learn more about them today at lyc.silkstart.com. That's lyc.silkstart.com.
This message is approved by the Libertarian Youth Caucus.
America, from Hoboken to Spokane, the star
All right, folks, we're back. Keith, I want to continue on the topic of culture because you're absolutely right. We need to tap into the zeitgeist of readers and viewers and listeners out there. And we need to kind of sprinkle in our message so that maybe they'll get interested into other things. Now, with me, I'm a big dystopian fiction fan. I always liked Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm and Brave New World and The Hunger Games. It seems like a lot of the films and a lot of the new stories out there, at their heart, they're very anti-authoritarian. And I think a lot of people, they love these stories. They love the characters. They love the struggle. They're intrigued by the romance and the action, the adventure. But the same person that could say, oh, Katniss Everdeen is my hero, is the same person that's going to go and vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump this coming November. Do you think that's a sign that maybe we're on the wrong side of this issue?
I think the problem is that those movies tend to depict these authoritarian governments as being these top-down, openly fascist institutions, rather than depicting the incremental steps, the road to serfdom, as F.A. Hayek called it. So I think that a lot of the message that somebody who's informed about politics and government might get from watching a movie like Hunger Games might be lost on somebody who doesn't have that background necessarily. But it's important to know that either way, the ideas, that they're exposed to them. And when they are provided with more information about it in the future, they could probably make those connections, and the movie will, speak to them louder, if you will. So I remember learning more about libertarianism and looking back at movies like even Ghostbusters and being like, hey, here's a movie where a free market entity is created to solve a problem that the government doesn't recognize, and then a government regulator comes in and shuts it down and creates all the problems. I was like, look at that. This is a libertarian movie. So I think that when you have a message like that in a movie, even if you don't have the underlying information to put the pieces together at the time, if you learn the prerequisite stuff later on, it'll click, which is why even though some of these people might watch Hunger Games and not get it, I think it's still important that there are stories like Hunger Games out there. And I think that more people should be, we need more libertarians and more conservatives writing more movies and in books and doing stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even fiction. A big example that I like to bring up, especially when I talk to, Democrats and progressives, is the Dallas Buyers Club. Because the left ate up the Dallas Buyers Club. That was like their movie for a solid year with Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto.
Right.
But the thing about the film, it didn't really advocate for LGBT rights at all. If anything, the movie was explicitly talking about how bureaucracy kills.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, take off the veneer, take off the fact that we got to see Jared Leto in drag years before he would don the green hair and red lipstick in the Suicide Squad.
I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just gonna hurt you. Really, really bad.
The movie was about guys that just wanted to live. And they identified that they own their bodies and that they wanted to try out these new pills and vaccines and medicines that when they tried to go the legal route, it was the FDA.
Right. Who was the bad guy in the movie? The FDA. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny how liberals can watch that and have their ideas still upheld somehow and come out thinking, oh, that was a great movie. And it's cognitive dissonance, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that. It's so many more things.
But it's the messaging isn't lost on all of them. I mean, and that's why you have them attacking some of these heroes and some of these characters in movies. I mean, Captain America has been under assault from all different sorts of groups, attacking him because he's a libertarian, because he's a patriot.
Because he's straight. That's the biggest thing. I just can't wrap my mind
heterosexual.
around. People don't realize how many times Cap slept around in the comics. Like, I actually think that I discovered libertarianism through comic books growing up. Not just because of the stories I read, but because I was reading comics and watching the cartoons before Robert Downey Jr. made it popular. This is back before girls were wearing Avenger shirts and stuff, and it was sexy to be a geek. It was because it was, like many other things, it was fringe. Reading a comic book was looked down upon. But when people ask me how I learned to read, sometimes I read comic books before I read an actual book. I understood certain plot lines and certain story mechanisms through comic books before I read it in any other book.
Oh, I think a lot of kids actually come to it that way. I mean, for me, I didn't get to comics until I was a little bit older, but one of my best friends, he would attest to the same thing you're saying. He basically learned how to read because of comics, and these Marvel and DC series that a lot of people grew up with are larger than life. The cultural impact they have is just huge. I mean, everybody knows what Spider-Man is. Even if you haven't read a comic or seen a movie, you know what Spider-Man is. Then that's the kind of impact these things have.
Yeah, I mean, just using comic books as an example specifically, I think that even though you've got Alan Moore is a self-identified anarchist. The guy wrote The Watchmen. He wrote V for Vendetta. Often films that are hailed as being, the most libertarian, the most anti-statist graphic novels and comics of all time. And then you've got guys that are, Marvel has a lot of progressives who are their writers. They did a reboot of their entire franchise a few years ago. They called it Marvel Now. And that's where we got Asian Hulk and gay Iceman and female Thor and black Captain America turned Nazi Captain America. And even though it's like they took something that was, because I think that the heroes emulated what was going on in life. They took these anti-authoritarian, these good versus evil concepts, and now they're trying to twist it.
Yeah, well, they're sacrificial lambs, to be burned at the stake. We have to sacrifice the heterosexual, patriotic Captain America because he's a symbol of everything that the left hates now. He's moral and patriotic, and he is unabashedly straight, and he's white, and he's a man. I mean, it doesn't get much worse. I mean, I bet he voted Republican. So I mean, he must be burned at the stake, and this push to just feminize him, or they want to hook him up with the Winter Soldier, with Bucky. They want to make him a couple. It's like it's just too much for me. It shows me really though they understand, even if it's subconsciously, the effect and the power of these symbols, and it bothers them. There's not enough trigger warnings in the world for Captain America because he's everywhere. He's on the lunch boxes. He's on the kids' pajamas. He's you can't go anywhere without seeing Captain America these days. So if they can't get trigger warnings and remove it from our culture, then they want to just change it so that it suits them, kind of like they just did with the Ghostbusters.
Oh my gosh. I mean, on your Facebook fan page alone, you have Captain America holding an AK-47.
Absolutely.
If that does not make progressives' heads explode just the moment they come on, it's like, oh, what's this here? Oh, it's a superhero. What the hell?
Well, that's why I put it up there. I had something more professional for a while, and I said, you know what? I said, if they want to attack Captain America, if they want to change Captain America, because the last straw for me was when they decided to make Captain America a Nazi. The liberal commies over at Marvel Comics decided to make Captain America a Nazi.
Oh my gosh! I actually have an update on that, which I can spoil for you unless you want to go get the comic.
No, you go right ahead and spoil that.
There was such outrage, such outright anger and rage aimed at Marvel, what they did was in issue 2 of the brand new Steve Rogers Captain America series, because there are 2 Captain America series right now, one of the Sam Wilson Falcon Captain America and one with Steve Rogers.
Right,
but,
one with the virtuous commie liberal Captain America, and one with the evil Nazi fascist Captain America, the one we all knew and grew up with. But okay, yes, go on.
I'm still waiting for, a pansexual, self-identifying Black American equine Captain America to pop up. I mean, I'm just waiting for that to occur. But there was so much rage aimed at Steve Rogers, because in the comics, what happened was he had lost his powers in a fight with this one villain. That's what caused Sam Wilson, the ultra-liberal Captain America, to take the mantle. And then Captain America got his powers back through the Cosmic Cube, which, for those of you that aren't aware of the comics, you've probably seen it in the Marvel films. So he gets his powers back with the Cosmic Cube, but what it does is it...
Fans were so angry that they...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that they made somebody other than Steve Rogers Captain America. But anyways, go.
But basically, they the Cosmic Cube, it brainwashed Captain America into thinking he was a Nazi Hydra spy.
Oh, and you know that this was something they thought of afterwards, because they were adamant that this was a great idea of theirs to make him a Nazi.
I think with me alone, with the amount of Marvel comics I buy, when I openly said after they did that to Captain America that I'm done buying comics, I think their stock went down.
I think what really hurt them is when it was pointed out by Jewish readers that Captain America was created by a Jew. And as an anti-Nazi, anti-fascist symbol, and that they're perverting him to make him into this secret Nazi was an insult to the Jewish people who had to suffer through World War II and everything since then. So I think that was what really hit home with them. I don't think they expected that kind of backlash and people to read into it that way. But when you really think about it, it is insulting. And again, it's the power of symbols. Captain America is more than a character now. He's a symbol, and his symbol is anti-fascism. It's for the individual. It's for the American way. All the principles we're supposed to have as a country, even if we stray from them sometimes in practice. Captain America is those ideals embodied in a superhero. And that's why the left hates him.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just growing up as a kid, here I am. I was totally popular in high school. I loved Ayn Rand and Captain America. And for me,
the parties.
Just all the time. Girls are just tossing their underwear and numbers at me like crazy. But, I mean, for me, Steve Rogers was like a Christian Howard Rourke, in a way.
Right,
it's like he did everything simply because he wanted to do it, simply because he knew full well the danger he would encounter being a hero. He knew full well how he would be ostracized by the world that didn't understand him. And just like Howard Rourke, he was okay with that, because what mattered was his self-determination. He wanted to see the results. He wanted to create a better world. Howard Rourke wanted to construct things that would live on past him. And it was just, when they tried to make Captain America a Nazi, I flipped out.
No, it was too much for me, too. I mean... Yeah. And that's when I really decided. I wrote a piece for the Libertarian Republic, which was basically, it was titled "Social Justice Warriors Need to Leave Our Beloved Characters Alone." And it was between Captain America and the push to make James Bond a woman. I had had enough. I was,
How would that work? I mean, with James Bond, when he goes and sleeps around, he's a player. With Jane Bond, I mean, I don't see that.
You're not allowed to say that Jane Bond can't sleep around and still be virtuous, Remzo. That's sexist. You can't say that.
I'm thinking of what, the culture war Avengers would be like. You'd have ultra straight, libertarian Christian Captain America. You'd have Milo Yiannopoulos. You'd have Who else?
Have
Oh,
some
gosh.
sort of transsexual, gender ambiguous character as well.
We'll just say Jared Leto from Dallas Buyers Club. With a gun. With a gun. We'll say that. But anyway, Keith, if people want to keep track of you, read your work, follow you and everything you do with TLR, how can they keep track with you?
Well, the best way to do it is probably to follow me on Facebook. It's where I'm the most active, and that's facebook.com/Keith Farrell Public if you want to go to it directly, or you can just search Keith Farrell, and I'm sure I'll pop up on there.
Perfect. So, Keith, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a blast having you on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Remso. Good times.
Good times. Well, definitely, folks, listen in next week for another installment of the Remso Republic. I'm your host, Remso W. Martinez. As always, screw the FCC. Good night, America.
Stay connected to Liberty's Rabble Rouser on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with the latest episodes, blogs, and other available content. What are you waiting for?